Hey guys, about a year ago, Rollo Tomassi published his fourth volume of The Rational Male, which centers around the topic of religion. And the most critical portion of that book was his piece on assimilation, which theorizes that virtually all of the major religions will be subject to what he calls the assimilation of the feminine imperative. Now, personally, I don't think this is anything new or groundbreaking or even original in the sense that you've had these thinkers and great philosophers of the past like Nietzsche, who criticized and condemned in the harshest terms possible both Christianity and Judaism as being weak, effeminate religions that were best suited for slaves, because of the Jesus teachings of loving your enemies and turning the other cheek, the last shall be first, the first last, and all that stuff. And then you had others like Spengler who took that criticism even further by saying that Christianity was the grandmother of Bolshevism and liberalism. And what he really meant was that Christianity's espousal of universalism and this idea that we're all equal, those kind of things ultimately resulted in these religions being devoured by its own values. So, yeah, you're probably asking yourself, what the heck does that have to do with Islam and the red pill? I mean, if you guys have been following that stuff, there is this tendency within the red pill movement to romanticize Islam. And I think the most clear, obvious example of that was Andrew Tate's appearance on the Fresh and Fit podcast, where he states that, Islam fixes a lot of the problems that men face today. But, on the other hand, Rollo Tomassi, he actually argues to the contrary. He says that while Islam appears to be, the last patriarchal holdout, that it will succumb to feminine pressure. And in fact, he says that it is succumbing to feminine pressure. He points to Rashida Tlaib, Linda Sarsour, and Ilhan Omar. And he shows, those three examples as proving that Islam is also undergoing a process of transformation. Now, that's very, very controversial because now you have a social divide within the Muslim community where you have one section of Muslims who say that, Islam and the red pill are compatible to some degree. You got, for example, Mahdi Tidjani, Daniel Hakikachu. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you got these Muslims who argue that, oh no, the red pill and Islam are diametrically opposed to one another. And the most common example I could think of is the Shahid Bolsen guy who runs the Middle Nation podcast. To sum it up, those Muslims who consider themselves red-pilled, there's this shared concern that, foreign ideologies like liberalism and feminism have, somehow permeated Muslim communities, not only in the West, but they also say Muslim majority countries, surprisingly. And for the anti-red pill Muslims, they're saying the opposite. They're saying, oh no, that these claims are alarmist, they're exaggerated, and that Muslims have remained fortified in the face of these attempts. So what I intend to do is to analyze this divide within the Muslim community over the red pill question in order to provide some answers, hopefully. So the first person we're going to look at is the guy by the name of Shahid Bolsen. Now he, as I said before, I think he's a blogger and he founded that Middle Nation podcast. He formerly called it Qawamun, which that's a Quranic term referring to male guardians and protectors of women. And he's basically attempting to counter the effects of red pill on the Muslim community. And the main underlying message in the majority of his videos is that men have to stop complaining, they gotta take responsibility. Basically a message which is not much different from what you would hear from guys like Jordan Peterson or these tradcons, these traditional conservatives who desire this return to chivalry. But then there's on the other hand, you have someone like Mahdi Tidjani. He's a YouTuber, content creator, and he focuses on the commonalities between Islam and the red pill praxeology. Now, he's challenged some of the assumptions of the anti-red pill Muslims. Interestingly enough, he connects some of the red pill theories on hypergamy with the traditional Islamic position on Mahr. And for those of you who don't know what that is, Mahr is just it's an Arabic term referring to like the sum of money or goods that the husband provides with the wife. He provides to the wife, at the time of marriage. And Tidjani also connects red pill theories on body count with the Islamic view on premarital virginity and chastity. And that's something that's resulted in very heated debates between him and his critics. I mean, if you see some of the shows, mostly female, that they would come, on his podcast and strongly disagree with him. And then he also had that debate with Gabriel el-Romani, and Romani was basically arguing that Tidjani is making Muslims look bad and stuff, and they were throwing different hadith narrations at each other and so on. And on the question of Mahr, Shahid Bolsen, who's a critic of Tidjani, he states the following.
Assalamu alaikum. So I've seen some brothers complaining online about high mahr, that they don't want to pay this high mahr, and why are these young girls asking so much money, and isn't that just un-Islamic and against the Sunnah and all of that kind of stuff. Look, bro, I thought that we stopped talking about this over 1,000 years ago when Umar ibn al-Khattab was saying the same thing, and he was corrected publicly by a woman who told him, okay, is your statement about we're not supposed to charge that much for a mahr better, or is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better when he said أَتَيْتُمْ إِحْدَاهُنَّ قِنْطَارٍ? In other words, you can give for a mahr like a mountain of gold. So are you saying now that Allah has said that we can give him that much, and you're saying we can't give him that much, and that was supposed to end the argument? But until now, people are still saying that a woman can't ask that much money for a mahr. Bro, she can ask whatever she wants. That's what Umar said afterwards when he came out and said, I was wrong. Let them charge whatever they want for a mahr. Let them set the fee as high as they like. Doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you can ask for it. There's no limit.
Now, there's a huge problem with this, okay? The problem is that what Bolsen is citing, the supposed hadith about the woman correcting Umar, it's been classified as very weak and unreliable by a number of hadith scholars of the past and present. And there's even an article I was reading from an Islamic website. It even shows that one of the early scholars, el-Feki, the guy who references this hadith, he admits that the chain he recorded is broken. And now, if you want to get to more contemporary stuff, well, he died many years ago, but his name was Nasiruddin al-Albani. He was an eminent hadith scholar and revisionist. He stated, not only are the chains broken, but they also contain weak narrators which further weaken the chain. And yeah, he concludes that this hadith is definitely weak. And there was another site that I saw. It's called Authentic Sira, and the guy who runs it, I believe he's a scholar by the name of Abu Muaz Muhammad Mana. He states that despite the fact that this hadith contains a whole bunch of references, he makes it clear. He says, references in and of themselves do not make a hadith narration authentic. And he goes on to say that this story is extremely weak and none of the routes are Sahih or Hasan. And lastly, there was also this Facebook group. It's called Muslims Against Khawarij, and that's like a Salafi Facebook group. And they argue that this hadith has been weaponized by the Ikhwani and Khawarij callers to falsehood. So basically anyone that's affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood and modernist, etc. Another site even suggested that this hadith has been used by those groups to give the impression that women were somehow politically and socially active in early Islamic history. But with all being said and done, the traditions, the Islamic traditions overwhelmingly affirm that reducing the mahr is the Sunnah. And in fact, Mahdi Tidjani, in his video entitled Mahr Problems, he provides a compilation of hadith narrations and Islamic scholarly consensus on the question of mahr.
So, firstly and foremost, we have this hadith here. This is taken from Islam Q&A. I like to go to Islam Q&A for whatever questions I have. I can't remember which sheikh it is who runs this website, but I've been going to this website for the past 10 years or so. First hadith, Prophet ﷺ said, the best of marriage is that which is made easiest. Okay, this is the general hadith. Let's see the next one. And he, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, also said, the best of mahr is the simplest or most affordable. Okay, now let's keep going down. There was another one I wanted to show you guys. So we have the hadith here with it relates to what the mahr for Fatima radiallahu anha was. Now we have here Umar al-Khattab radiallahu anhu said, do not go to extremes with regards to the dowry of women, for if that were a sign of honor and dignity in this world, or a sign of piety before Allah, then Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam would have done that before you. But he did not give any of his wives, and none of his daughters were given more than 12 uqiyah. A man may help increase the dowry until he feels resentment against her, and says, you cost me everything I own, and caused me a great deal of hardship. I do not know what 12 uqiyah is off the top of my head. Oh, here it is. The equivalent to 480 dirham, which is approximately 135 silver riyal. Okay, this was the mahr of the daughters and the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, you might say, oh, but I don't want to go to an extreme. £20,000 not an extreme. £50,000 not an extreme. £100,000 not an extreme. And what if he's a very rich man? What if he's a multimillionaire or a billionaire? Then £1 million not an extreme for him. He's a wealthy man. What's the big deal? Well, let's see what Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah has to say on this affair. So we can see here, Shaykh al-Islam said in his Majmu' al-Fatawa, whoever thinks of increasing his daughter's mahr and asking for more than the daughters of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam were given when they were the best women in this world in all aspects, is an ignorant fool. The same applies to asking for more than the mothers of the believers were given, meaning the wives of the Prophet ﷺ. This applies even if one is well off and can afford it. With regards to the one who is poor, he should not give a mahr greater than he can afford to pay without any hardship. So we can see here quite clearly that even if you're a wealthy man, you should still make the mahr low, because the blessing is in the, I want to find the exact hadith properly. The Prophet ﷺ said, the best of marriage is that which is made easiest. That which is made easiest.
Now, another topic which Tidjani touched upon, as I said before, was the topic of body count. And he draws some of the parallels between the red pill theories on body count and the traditional Islamic views on the importance of premarital virginity and chastity. Now, anti-red pill Muslims like Bolsen have argued that these particular red pill theories have no relevance to the Muslim community. He claims that the social problems affecting the West are non-existent among Muslims. He even goes as far as presenting this very Manichaean dichotomy of us versus them. It's, Muslims versus the West and all that stuff. Like pretty much echoing Samuel Huntington's simplistic clash of civilizations. It is like a repeat of that. And I'll show the video.
So there are brothers and sisters online talking about gender issues, masculinity, femininity, feminism, red pill theories, and so on. And a lot of it has very little relevance in the Muslim world. The West's confusion is not our confusion. We are spectators to the dumpster fire that the West has become. We're not in the flames. And it's important to remember that. If you want to talk about these issues that are engulfing the West, do so. But do it as a critique of Western failures and a recognition of the superiority of Islam. Because what applies to them does not apply to us. Western masculinity may well be under assault. because of course it is. Western women may be running amok because of course they are. Misguidance and unbelief have consequences, but the Muslims are fortified. People who preach hysterically that our men and our women are getting swept up in the West's madness, or that they inevitably will be, are conspicuously overlooking the crucial difference between them and us. We have the guidance of Allah.
But you see, the issue with that is that when you take into account the present day mixing and, the cross-pollination of different ideologies, philosophies, these concepts that exist today, how people are just mixing them up, where you got these self-identified liberal Muslims, queer Muslims, feminist Muslims, and then that added with the sectarian divide that exists among Muslims. This whole us versus them dichotomy that Bolsen is presenting is completely outdated. In addition to that, Mahdi Tidjani, he went as far as suggesting that a lot of modern day Muslims no longer uphold the Islamic standard of premarital virginity and chastity, and that many Muslims themselves, like their Western counterparts, are engaging in zina or sex outside of marriage.
Bro, I'm speechless. I've seen some conversations lately, Akhi. Bro, these sisters are moving mad, actually, crazy. Like some of the conversations the brothers show me that they have on these apps like Muzmatch and so on. I've been posting a couple of them on my stories on Instagram. I'm like, what? Mutahajjiba prays 5 times a day, supposedly, al asas. And she's like, yeah, so long as you put it in the rear end and you maintain my V card, we're all right, we're good to go. What? Are you kidding me, bro? Mad, Akhi. Mental.
I got nothing. I'm just...
And what Tidjani was referring to in that clip is known as technical virginity, and like by definition that means like someone who substitutes oral or anal intercourse for vaginal sex. And apparently, believe it or not, this is like a common phenomenon in Muslim majority countries of the Middle East and North Africa. And unfortunately, the data and research on this is very limited because of the constraints in place by the governments of these countries. But there's a great number of writers and researchers who've dealt with that topic, that taboo subject of sexuality in some of the Arab countries. And these authors include people like Leila, Slimani, Wedad Luta, excuse me, Shireen el-Feki. There's others, but I'll just stick with those 3 for now. Leila Slimani, she's a novelist from Morocco and a journalist, and she authored a book called Sex and Lies, True Stories of Women's Intimate Lives in the Arab World. And she gives these testimonies of women regarding issues like sexual intimacy, virginity, prostitution, etc. And in spite of these seemingly Islamic culture and norms that exist there, zina or sex outside of marriage is common as long as it's done in private. And in fact, one of the women interviewed by Slimani on the subject of virginity is a woman by the name of Soraya, and she's in her 40s. She states, quote, "I had heard that some girls agreed to have anal sex rather than lose their virginity, and I didn't understand this notion of purity," end quote. And she interviews this other woman by the name of Noor, who's a 30-something-year-old middle-class woman. And she states, quote, "Like everyone else, I know some girls in hijab who agree to anal sex so as to preserve their hymens," end quote. Soraya also mentions the fact that a lot of the young Moroccan women who lost their virginity, they actually consider undergoing hymen restoration surgery, which that's become increasingly popular in a number of Arab countries. Wedad Luta, she's a religious Emirati counselor who gained notoriety for her book entitled Top Secret: Sexual Guidance for Married Couples. And in there, she focuses on topics like the female orgasm, the importance of sexual education, and the dangers of anal intercourse. And controversially, she stated that due to the very strict segregation laws that exist in a lot of the Arab and Middle Eastern countries, well, not just the laws, it's just the norms, I guess, the very strict gender segregation that exists there, it's resulted in a lot of the men engaging in homosexual anal intercourse. And she states that, quote, many men who had anal sex with men before marriage want the same thing with their wives because they don't know anything else. This is one reason we need sex education in our schools, end quote. And the other researcher I mentioned was Shireen el-Feki. She's a British Muslim journalist, former immunologist of Egyptian and Welsh descent. She's written a really good book entitled Sex and the Citadel, Intimate Life in a Changing Arab World. Now, this book is very fascinating because she draws upon Michel Foucault's theories on the relationship between sexuality, politics, and the power dynamics. And within the second chapter of her book, underneath the section entitled A Sore Point, el-Feki refers to Dr. Ayman Zuhri, who's an Egyptian demographer, and he argued that the importation of Salafi Islam into Egypt has resulted in sex becoming a forbidden fruit. In fact, he states, quote, this brand of Islam has resulted in a harem mentality. Everything is explained by sexual parts. The body of the woman is the main concern in Salafi Islam. But when you hide a part, you focus on the hidden part, end quote. Shortly after that, el-Feki suggested that anal intercourse is one of those forbidden fruits. And she substantiates this by, providing statements of a Saudi doctor and gynecologist who stated that he knows for a fact that this is growing based on the number of women showing up at the clinic with anal tears and fissures and all that horrible stuff. And in the fourth chapter of the book, underneath a section entitled Misconceptions, now that piece revolves around the question of sexual education in the Middle East and North Africa. And she includes testimonies of the medical students and volunteers associated with Y-Peer Tunisia, which that's a network that seeks to promote sex education and health. And one of the volunteers had stated, quote, the man, he has all the right to sexual life, but the woman, she has to be a virgin. That's why a lot of them resort to the hymen repair operation, end quote. And then shortly after, another one of the volunteers then stated, quote, there is a lot of anal sex, frankly, because the girls say it's another way to control virginity. The men want her to be a virgin, so she finds a solution. That's why we raise awareness when we talk about sexual relations that includes anal as well, end quote. That's crazy. But lastly, this one is, I think, the most controversial of all. I didn't mention her, I believe, but there's this interview, and I have an excerpt of this interview with a girl by the name of Sara Torrent, and she appeared on the Eternal Life fan channel. Yeah, the Eternal Life fan channel. And she described herself as an ex-Muslim of Syrian descent. She kind of turned into this right-wing propagandist and stuff. But she's lived in Kuwait for a number of years. And in this interview, she goes into detail about the nature of sexuality among the youth in Kuwait. This is very controversial. It was unexpected to me seeing this, but I'll put up the clip right now.
No,
what are the Muslims' views on anal sex?
I haven't seen a big drama about it. Actually, all Muslims I know have anal sex because they don't want to lose their virginity, because if the girl loses her virginity before marriage, it's a big deal. So
really, and they don't see anal sex as losing their virginity.
No, oh my god, but so many people who have had anal sex in Kuwait, and they're like, well, I'm still a virgin, and I'm like, you've had 50 dicks. What are you talking about? It's so weird. They and mind you, most of them actually wear the burqa, and Kuwait has developed a party culture that starts at 8 a.m. because that's when girls say they're at school or at college or at work, but they're really partying. So there's an entire party culture that starts at 8 a.m. dedicated to Muslims.
Oh, wow.
and anal sex. And this is like a famous phenomena in Kuwait. It's so famous that we have like the culture has developed certain slang we use, like there's like this one college that's the college. It's a junior college for women, and that's basically like where all the women who come from the super Muslim places would go to college, because it's a religious college. And like in Kuwait, if you like basically want to say a girl is cheap, you'll say she's from that college. Like it's that bad. It's that bad. And then they even make like, oh my God, the amount of jokes is like ridiculous. I could so bring in a Kuwaiti who can tell you about all this. I have a Kuwaiti friend who laughs at this like hysterically. He's just like, I have this friend who used to like hate the fact that this goes on in his country, but now he's just in complete like, yep, fuck it. But it's so weird, man. It's like so alien, and like I feel like it's one of those things. I don't know how how no one is going, what the fuck, you know? It's like a bunch of salon articles, you know? You read them and you go like, how does no one at the office notice how ridiculous this is?
Wow. It's really interesting. So you're making it sound like in Islam and the Middle East, anal sex is like even more popular. Because I figured it was kind of like Christianity, where in Christianity, anal sex is kind of demonized, right? It's called sodomy, and there's the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and I figured it was kind of the same way in Islam, but apparently not. It's more accepted in Middle Eastern culture.
Religiously speaking, I don't even know if it's okay, but like I've seen things like you know those like Ask Abby's in the newspaper stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually like seen before something about how a woman was saying something about how her husband likes anal sex, but she doesn't, and it was like handled so normally in the paper, like this is a family paper. But I feel like it's just so normal there, even though like my mom has always been freaked out by this. Like I don't think my mom has ever been like don't have sex, but she's been like don't have anal sex, and I'm like what are you even talking to me about? It's just like very popular to the point that my mom actually mentioned that before she mentioned regular sex.
Wow, that's interesting. So, and is that because your mom was what influenced your mom to have those views about anal sex? And did that influence you at all, being told that by your mom?
I mean, I feel like it's one of those things that I don't know if someone has to tell you if you should like it or not. You know, it's one of those things that you just kind of decide on your own. But I think the reason why my mom said it was because she knew how popular it was, like everywhere. It's one of those things where you just know that everyone does it. So like, it's not assumed that someone would say no.
Mm-hmm. Could it be that she was maybe concerned about health hazards from it?
No,
like,
yeah, no. My mom was actually like concerned about like. So, I think it was so bad that my mom like was concerned I'd have sex at all, and it didn't even cross her mind that I'd have regular sex. I think it was that bad.
Wow. So they're really using this anal sex as like a backdoor way to stay virgin or something, and still have sex. And
they are. It's so weird. Let me tell you something. You and all your viewers, you want to get anal, you find yourself a girl from the Middle East, the Gulf area, like Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain. Usually they'll know what they're doing. Like pro tip.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So yeah, guys, to make the long story short, things are not always what they appear to be on the surface. You know, whether or not you agree with this whole red pill stuff, the red pill praxology, you have to admit that it's raised some, very interesting questions. And this process of globalization has transformed our world into a small village, so to speak. And because of that, no one is immune to the types of social issues that may exist in other parts of the world, no matter what your religion or faith is. All right, so That's it for now, guys. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like and subscribe buttons, share with your friends and family, and let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Share your thoughts and ideas, be respectful with each other, and yeah guys, thank you. Take care.